AllThingsFulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Two Guys and a Bible broadcast right here on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. And I am William Bell. And at the current time, I'm waiting for Don Preston to make his arrival. He will do so just shortly. He's had some technology crashes and had to go into the office, so we're just waiting for him to make his arrival. But until that time, we are here, and so it'll take just a few minutes to get there and get set up and settle as we go. And it's just one of those things where occasionally you run into these temporary issues with technology and kind of holds you back. But nevertheless, as long as there's a will, there's a way. And so, we'll get through this and we'll continue on. We are going to be updating our promo in just a little bit, as soon as I can, as they say, get around to it so I can do it. At any rate, we have, announced for quite some time that Don has 19 books, and I think that was back when I first recorded it, which has been quite some time ago now. But currently, as he notified me and updated me, he has 30 books. And so he's written 30 books. That's almost a full library, actually, if you please, for some people. And but yet a great one, and many people continue to read his books to make, and take advantage of them, all the knowledge that has been deposited there, and some excellent work that has been done by Don Preston. And so I just want to let you know there are 30 books available. So if you don't have them all, if you need to go to his website at donpreston.com and check out some of the books that are there, make sure that you do so and fill your basket with them, because they are absolutely great books. Now, we also want to take a little bit of time to announce the upcoming TV broadcast, the cable TV broadcast on the NOWNETWORK. We're supposed to air this Saturday at 7:30. I hope that everything goes well. We have been waiting on some production, information and processes to take place that we haven't quite got finished yet, and so that's making me a little bit nervous, and some other things that are going on. And but nevertheless, it's nothing with the network. It's all about us, and that time is really, really rolling around. It's just one of those things that has crept up on us. But, first of all, let me thank everyone who has, submitted your prayers and your well wishes. Those of you who have, offered to help in every way you can, especially for your financial support that makes this possible, because without that, we could not do it. And to be able to have access to another platform that can help spread the message is great. And we're not just going out singly, we're going out by twos. As the Lord said, they went out in twos, and that's what we're going to be doing, because in addition to our broadcast, which should air Saturday at 7:30, we also have Don Preston, who will be airing beginning in July. And the Morning Musings Broadcast will air in July. The time for his broadcast, I believe, and of course he'll correct this if it's incorrect, but I think it's 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. I know they made some changes from where it was before. Initially, it was at 5 a.m., and which was quite early, but they managed to make some changes, and 9 o'clock is a time that should be a pretty good time for a broadcast, and that is going to happen in July. Our broadcast is 7:30 p.m. on Saturdays. These are 30-minute shows, and we are certainly looking forward to it. It's kind of hard to get what you want to say in 25 or 30 minutes, and of course that's the struggle that I'm dealing with right now. But it is what it is, and so we'll continue on. But let me give you some information on the Now Network before we go to another announcement as we await the arrival of Dr. Preston. The Now Network has a viewership of over 30 million homes in the U.S. on cable television. NTS Communications, Channel 249 in Texas and Louisiana. NK Telco Cable, Channel 70 in California and Tennessee. Lightstream Cable, Channel 80 in Florida. And Tiki Live Cable, Channel 106, FTC, Channel 259 in South Carolina. WLPC, that's WLP as in Peter, C, 40.5 in Michigan, and Rodeo Network, Channel 364 in Washington and Michigan. These are channels that are available. Now, we can also be viewed on our free mobile app, which is the Roku channel, and so that's the Now Network that will be on the Roku channel. So if you have access to that, you can also pull it up and just sit there and watch it right on Roku. There's Cloud TV, and that's spelled with a K, so KLOWD TV, and 24/7 online streaming at the Now Network. So you'll be able to go to the Now Network and pull the broadcasts at any time that you choose because they have 24/7 streaming. And so this is, one of the largest Christian network broadcasting companies out there, and it's continuing to grow. They're continuing to expand their markets, and we want to notify everyone so that you can take advantage of the information there. Tell your friends about it. Tell your family members. Tell the people that you've been trying to get to, listen or watch, the information on YouTube or wherever, and we have people all the time saying, well, I don't use YouTube. Other people say I don't use Facebook. And so they're just not willing to either use those social media platforms, but some of them certainly enjoy watching television and will be glad to watch on TV. So now you have a cable network where the Morning Musings Broadcast will be aired, as well as the All Things Fulfilled Broadcast, and we encourage you to take advantage of those. We also have some good news, and by the way, before I go there, I want to just, for the people in Tennessee, which will be the people who will have access to it in the Tennessee area, again, that is NK Telco Cable Channel 70. And I have to remember that, so I said it really for myself so I can remember to know what channel it is in California and Tennessee. Now, in addition to that, we've had some very, very positive comments and positive conversations, I should say, because they've actually been telephone conversations. We've had a couple this week already, and both of which have been very positive, of people who are learning and who are listening. And, we have people calling us and telling us, look, I've been listening to you for 2 or 3 years, and those seeds are beginning to bear fruit. And, we're being told that it's not just 1 or 2 people that are listening, but they got huge groups of people that are scattered across the country who are listening to these broadcasts and to our Facebook presentations, to our YouTube presentations, and pretty much anywhere else they can find the information, and they are excited about it. We talked to a gentleman today, Eldon Israel and I, and this is people in the Hebrew Israelite community, which says a lot in terms of how we're beginning to reach out to them. And so, there's been sort of just an ongoing effort to expose them to this information, and they're beginning to respond in a positive way. We know that there are different groups out there. Some groups, have a certain behavioral style, and other groups have a different behavioral style. And so we're getting some of those who are, real diligent Bible students, people who are paying attention to what's going on, and they've been listening for some time. And I was so impressed with the conversation that we had today because, listening to the individual, you could hear that they had all of the various points down. They knew what the particular arguments and doctrines are related to fulfilled eschatology and fulfilled Bible prophecy. They knew what they were. And so as we were, just having conversation, and I don't think we spoke more than maybe 20 or 30 minutes, but within that, the person was able to articulate very well many of the things that we teach, and shows that they have a very good understanding. They're excited about the opportunity to be exposed to the kingdom of God, that they have now understood that the kingdom is present. They have understood that the tabernacle of God is present, the kind of things that we're talking about on this broadcast. And they just want to know, how can we more effectively take advantage of what's here? They know that, the end of the age has occurred, that it was past. They have understood, and we have to clarify just a few things with them earlier today when we were having the conversation about, the law, because that's one of the big things in that community is the law of Moses. And so being able to communicate with them and share with them that the law of Moses was fulfilled, and make the distinctions between the fulfillment of the law and the passing of the law and the eternal principles that have always been in place by God. And what we mean by that is, when you look at the law, and even if you're just singling out the 10 Commandments, we certainly have the 10 Commandments that are mentioned as part of the law, but then many of those, will say, once we talk about the law passing, well, they will say, well, then does that mean that we can break the 10 Commandments? Now, they don't really say it that way. They actually point out very specific commandments that they think that, in being a New Testament believer or a Christian, that we are saying that they have license to do certain things that, they couldn't do under the 10 Commandments. And that is as far from what we're saying as can be. But one of the things that we point out was that, the law to keep the seventh-day Sabbath is not brought into the new covenant, and that those things were types and shadows. The feast days, festivals, etc., new moons, foods and drinks, and all of those things were all a part of the shadows and types of the old covenant. And so those things were not brought over. And so it was a matter of us just taking some time with the gentleman who had a good understanding of almost everything, to let him know that distinction between these eternal principles that grow out of the character of God. And that so these things are related to God's moral and ethical character, so that love becomes the predominating character trait of God, because the Bible actually says that God is love. And because he is love, God operates in a certain way, requires certain things, and he will never authorize anything for man that is not for man's well-being, that is not for the good of man. And so to put man in a situation and tell him that he can have anarchy, that he can have chaos in the way that he lives and not be governed by these laws that protect him and that bless him for following them, would be very evil on the part of God. It would be, it would be an evil if that were the case. It would be irresponsibility on his part, and it would demonstrate that God doesn't really love us. It's just like you with your kids. If you have children, you're going to give them rules, and you're going to give them requirements that are for their well-being. When you tell, little Johnny or David that he has to go to bed at 8 o'clock, you're giving him that rule. I mean, it's a law, if you please, one of the parental laws, so to speak. But when you give him that, you're doing that for his well-being, because you don't want him to ruin his health by, especially as a young, growing child who needs to get their rest and to be able to function properly, et cetera, not be irritable and bouncing off the walls as some of these kids are today. But you want them to rest. You don't want to let them go to, the store and pull all the candy off the racks and, sit down and fill their plate with lollipops and sugar daddies and, moon pies and things like that. And look at that as, that's a meal, so let them eat what they want. No, you're going to give them some guidelines. You're going to give them the nutrients that they need, make sure they have, vegetables, make sure they have their proteins, make sure they have the grains that they need, all of the things that are necessary. Why? Because you love them and you wouldn't dare, give them things for their bodies that are not good for them. And that's the same way it is with God. He can't have a creation, since he is a God of love, and then allow that creation to live irresponsibly without law. And so law is going to be a part of the age. It's going to be a part of the realm of life from throughout beginning, middle, and the world without end. There must also always be law, because God is love. And since God is love, he has given us those things that say, okay, you've got to love your neighbor. And if you love your neighbor, you're not going to do these things, such as, what we have mentioned in Romans chapter 13, where he says, owe no man anything but to love one another, for love is the fulfillment of the law. Love is the fulfillment of law, period. And so from that perspective, as long as love is in the world, and it'll be here as long as God is here, then there will be some laws. But notice when he gives them, as he's mentioning them, he says, for the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if there is any other commandment, all are summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. So in God telling us to love our neighbors, he tells us to do that because that's good for us, it is good for our neighbors, and it demonstrates our love for him and his love for us. And so we can never be in a situation or in a society where that is not the case. And so this is what's happening out there, that we are reaching people who were, to begin with, in many cases, very opposed to what we're doing. And we still run into that, of course, a lot, but it's not just with the Hebrew Israelite community. We also find it with the Christian community, because we are speaking to some guys who now are, beginning to take issues with things because they don't see them as we see them at this point. And we understand that, we're not trying to press them on them or anything, but, we're getting the pushback because they think that, what is being said is not according to the scriptures. And so that's their natural reaction to push back against them. On the other hand, as we said, there are many people who are making some great strides in following those things that we're saying and in beginning to incorporate them into their teaching and learning. And we're beginning to set up classes with them and studies with them by phone and by video so that we can help them along even further as they continue on this journey of seeking God and trying to understand what's being said. And so that is a very, very good thing, and we are really, really excited about what's going on. There are some great messages. I know that at the present time, Don Preston is engaged with William Vincent in a debate, and that is a debate going on YouTube. And so I think their first and second propositions have been, or arguments have been published, about 30-minute presentations, and so that's moving along. And then, of course, Don is engaged in a debate, a written debate with Ed Stevens. That's going along as well, and we hope that it continues. And I won't say anything further about that. But Dr. Preston is here, and just as he said, he'd be here within about 15 minutes. And so he's made it to his office and has access to a microphone. And so we're going to open up his mic and get on with our topic tonight. We've been talking about the foundation stone for a new temple. Well, we just lost him there, but he should be back shortly. I think the call dropped, and he was probably wondering why he wasn't on, but I was just getting ready to put him on. So maybe he'll call back in, and we'll see what happens to get him on the broadcast. But as I was saying, we've been talking about the foundation stone for a new temple, and we've looked at several passages in the scriptures, both in the Old Testament and in the New. And one of those key passages that we found in the Old Testament was taken from Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 16. Isaiah 28, verse 16 and following, that talks about the foundation stone that was to be laid in Zion. And of course, this foundation stone to be laid in Zion is a reference to the Lord Jesus Christ, who is that foundation stone. And so we're going to continue our studies along that line as we present the message to you tonight. But he says in Isaiah chapter 28, beginning at verse 14, and this is just a little bit of a review here, waiting on Don to get back in. It says, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord, you scornful men, who rule this people who are in Jerusalem. Because you have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we are in agreement. When the overflowing scourge passes through, it will not come to us. For we have made lies our refuge, and under falsehood we have hidden ourselves." And so we have this messianic prophecy and blessing that would come, but that also would bring judgment. But he says, "Therefore, thus says the Lord God, behold, I lay in Zion a stone for a foundation, a tried stone, a sure foundation, and whoever believes will not act hastily." All right, let's see if we can get done in this time. Give us just a second. All right, Don, are you able to get in this time? Hello, Dr. Preston. We've got you live. Let me try one more opportunity to see if we can. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are trying to get him in, and I can tell that he's on the line, but for some reason his audio has not come through just yet. Maybe he's having some challenges with his mic. Don, you might want to try calling in to the direct line by phone if you have a phone in the office. And let me give you that number just in case you're able to hear. That number is 347-838-8252. Again, that's 347-838-8252. Now, you might already be on that line. I'm not sure. But again, I'm unable to see why you're unable to get in, because I can see that you are here, and apparently you're probably hearing me because you're sticking around this time. And let me try one more time to see if I can get you into the broadcast. All right, let's try it once more. Ladies and gentlemen, this will just take a second. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I've been going back and forth trying to bring him in on the line, which seems to be having some problems right now, and I don't know whether that's a connectivity with his service provider or if it's just a technology issue with some of his equipment, but I know that he's had some problems with the equipment, and as a result of that, he was unable to get in from, his normal broadcasting location. He moved to another, and he seems to be having a similar problem with that as well. So I've tried to go in and out in order to give him an opportunity to get in, and I'm going to continue to try that. I'm going to do that again. We apologize for the difficulty that we're having right now with trying to get him some access online. So let's see what happens this time. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, well, we've tried about 3 or 4 times, and for some reason, we are not getting him. Make sure your mic is not on mute. That can also be a technical issue that we forget sometimes, that the mic is not on mute. And oh, how do I know that? Because I spent about 25 minutes trying to record a broadcast, and we looked up at the camera, and it's not on. But I can hear him now. we have a live person on the other end of the phone. And,
well, can you all honestly? You can hear me, right? I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Well,
yes,
boy,
I can hear you very well.
My headsets.
So what were you saying?
My headsets at the house completely quit. Okay, so I came back to the office as I called you there rather frantically and said, okay, I've had some equipment failure. So I came here to the office. I put on the set of headphones that I normally use here at my main desk, and I was getting absolutely nothing. They were being listed there, and when I adjusted my volume, they worked. But when I went into Skype, they were not showing at all. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I had another set laying here that I had purchased last week, and I put them on, and lo and behold, they work. So I have no clue why my regular set that was working this morning, I was listening to audio on the computer this morning with this set, but now it wouldn't work for Blog Talk. And so thankfully I had this extra set of microphones or earphones with a microphone laying here on my desk. Like I said, I plugged them in, and lo and behold, here I am.
Well, I tell you, sometimes you can't have too many sets. I know I have 3. Actually, I probably have about 6 or 7 sets of headsets. And I carry 3 with me to the radio station, one because, we may have guests occasionally, so we have those. But I've got about 6 sitting here, so if one happens to go out, I can, reach behind me and pull up another one pretty quickly and try it. But I know how that goes, and it's a very frustrating thing when you are unable to get that working.
Extremely so, and I will be buying another set tomorrow to have sitting here. It's just absolutely crazy. So, I do apologize for that.
You are cutting out just a little bit, Don. You are cutting out just a little as you speak.
Really?
So I don't know if you need to make a position adjustment or something.
Well, I really have no earthly idea what it might be. I don't have
You're
any
doing good
real.
now.
Okay. Well, we'll just hope that it continues. I have it plugged into a multi-plug USB portal instead of directly into my computer. Sometimes that can cause issues, but
it can.
If I plugged it directly into the front of my computer, I would have to unplug my Magic Jack, and that would cause other problems. So I'm going to try my best not to move around a lot, try not to cause any disturbance whatsoever, and hopefully we can carry on.
All right. Well, I just spent a little time, talking about the upcoming cable TV broadcast, and I talked about some conversations that we've had with some, gentlemen that have been listening for a couple of years, and it's beginning to bear some fruit. They pretty much can articulate covenant eschatology. They just have a few kinks here and there. And then I got some good news from another brother. I won't say anything at this point, but, we got another preacher that is going to, looks like he's going to, make a move in this direction as well. And I think he already has, but, just hasn't made that known. So, we just continue to do what we're doing, and that is very, very, very good. So we're glad to hear that is taking place as well.
Well, and I shared with you yesterday, I guess it was, or was it this morning? I've completely forgotten, that when we talk about things continuing to happen, yesterday I got in the mail a package, and I didn't recognize the name at all. It was from, I've got it laying right here next to me on my desk, the Gift of Life Ministry, and this is from the Netherlands. And I took it was a book. I took it out of the package, And the title of the book is Het Einde van de Einzig. And I'm going, say what?
Okay. And you are cutting out. You are cutting out a lot.
Oh, wow. Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I can hear you. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's got to be this multi-plug. Absolutely got to be the multi-plug. Anyway, I could not read the name of the title. There was a letter enclosed, and this gentleman, if you allow me just a moment to read some of this, he says, "I know this is in Dutch and you won't be able to read it, but still I wanted to send it to you because you mean a lot to me. In the years gone by, I listened to many of your morning musings and read some of your books. You need to know that there are no Dutch teachers who teach the preterist view on eschatology. A few English books are translated in Dutch, such as Paradise Restored, David Chilton, Raptureless of Jonathan Welton. But no book with this material of a Dutch author is ever published as far as I know. And I don't think there is any book with full preterism at all in Dutch. So this is a very special and historic moment. The Netherlands will get in touch.
Repeat that. You said this is a very special
and historic moment. The Netherlands will get in touch with good teaching now. And he closes by saying, maybe you can find your name in the list of resources that I use. Check the last pages of the book. And he gives a smiley face. And sure enough, he quotes from 3 of my books in this book. Now, obviously, that's very humbling and very flattering. The exciting thing about it is, as he says, he has published what is probably the very first full preterist book in the Dutch language. And that is just another example of how the truth of covenant eschatology continues to grow, continues to expand into places. Now, I've been corresponding with some people from the Netherlands. I think I've shared some of that on this program. I've had a slightly increasing, I'm certainly not going to over-magnify that, but I've had a slightly increasing bit of interest and book orders even from the Netherlands over the last 2 years. And to be honest about it, I did not have this man's name in my database. So he's brand new insofar as my contacts are concerned. So it was really, really exciting to hear from him, to have a copy of this book, and to know that he has launched out in his country. He's taken this really public stand of publishing a book on the truth of covenant eschatology. And as we have said so many times on this program, the truth keeps marching on. The truth keeps expanding and growing. 2 of my books so far, another one or two of them are in the process, but 2 of my books have already been translated into Romanian. And as I just mentioned, at least a couple of my other books are in the process of being translated into Romanian. So that's extremely exciting to know that people from literally everywhere are, they're launching out. It's not a cheap thing to publish a book. I mean, it's certainly easier now than it was 20 years ago. But still, it's quite a step, and it's a courageous step for someone to take that initiative, to put their name out there and to say, this is where I stand. This is what I believe. And so, like I said, it's just so exciting. And again, it's very humbling to see my name listed in the bibliography in the back of this book. It is a bibliography that includes the names of, Kenneth Gentry, Frank Gablin, R.T. France, Gordon Fee, William Lane, C.S. Lewis, Lincoln Andrew, John Lightfoot, John MacArthur, Terry Malone, and on and on and on it goes. And then there's the name of little old Don Preston listed right along with them. So that is such an encouragement, and needless to say, it is quite a thrill to see that. But the greatest thrill of all is to see the movement growing in this way. It's thrilling.
Yes. That is very, very exciting information, and that was a very impressive list of people that was mentioned as well. So that's good within itself, to see that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, his bibliography is very, very impressive. This man has been doing some very serious reading, as I mentioned, some of those names, Ralph Smith, Andrea Spataforta, Sproul, Spurgeon. I mean, on and on it goes. He cites Tacitus. And by the way, he's very familiar with Wallace, Foy Wallace, and N.T. Wright. So the man has done some reading. He's done some research. And so he is not just, may I use the term, he's not just a hayseed out there that just decided to write a book. Sometimes we encounter books like this that, to be very kind, the writing is poor, the language skills are poor, the style is poor, the grammar is poor, the editing is almost non-existent. They are not books that are ever going to accomplish anything. Now, we certainly admire and appreciate the zeal, the enthusiasm, the dedication of someone that sets out to write a book. But someone once said, to paraphrase Solomon's statement in Ecclesiastes 1, where he said, of the writing of books there is no end. Well, I've amended that personally and said, of the editing of books there is no end. And if there's a statement that was ever true, that is it. I've spent at least 3.5, 4 hours today editing a manuscript for a book that I'm helping to publish. It's the second book by Dan Derry. He's proofread it. Others have proofread it. My wife proofread it, the proof copy, day before yesterday, I think it was. I lose track of time. Anyway, and handed me a list of corrections to be made. Now, this is after I've looked at the manuscript at least 3 or 4 times. Dan's looked at the manuscript any number of times. Other proofreaders have read it. But here my wife hands me a long list of corrections to be made, and it's like, wow. But that's the way it goes. So with all of that said, and with all due kindness and with all due respect to anyone who sets out to write a book, that's to be appreciated. But it's not an easy thing at all to produce a book that will garner respect, garner attention, that will add credence to the movement and what have you. And so I have any number of manuscripts sent to me on a very regular basis. And first of all, I tell people I may or may not have time to read it. Number 2, I don't have time to do all of the editing. And number 3, I'm going to tell them exactly what I think that it might or might not need. Because the preterist movement needs quality work. It needs good, well-researched books that are scholarly, and by that I don't believe at all that a person's got to have a degree to write good books at all. I'm not saying that, but what I mean by scholarly is that the person must have done some research with the scholars. They must have read the scholars. They must know the field that they're talking about, instead of just making a lot of wild, unsubstantiated claims. Even if I happen to agree with the claims, I want to see documentation. and the audience, the reading audience, wants to read documentation. And so, here I am giving tips on prospective authors on how to write. But, I've had to go through very painful processes to learn how to write books that garner respect, that garner credibility, and what have you. And after having written 30 books now, I've started to catch on just a little bit. And yet you still encounter people who say, well, your books, they're not even scholarly. And then you have people who say your books are confusing. Some people say, well, I find your books just too simple to read. They're facile. Others say, well, they're too scholarly. They're way above my head. You can't please everyone. Absolutely, you cannot please everyone. You have to express what you believe in the very best way that you can, with as much credibility and with as much research as you're capable of doing. That's all any of us are able to do, is to do the very best that we can. And I'll call it quits on that. No sense in me going on and on about writing books. I appreciate anyone that sets out to do that. I really do. And all of that, of course, was prompted by this individual in the Netherlands who has written the very first full preterist book in the Dutch language. Now, by the way, I might challenge that because of a man by the name of Hugo Grotius, who lived in the 15th century. He did extensive writing, and he was an absolutely astounding academic prodigy. He wrote maritime laws that are still in use and still enforced today. There are some sources who say that Hugo Grotius was a college professor while he was still a teenager. Now, that's rather astounding. But anyway, he was a preterist and a fascinating guy. So I don't know if this gentleman who wrote this book is absolutely perfectly historically accurate, but I guarantee you what, he's awfully close to it. And again, that's all I'll have to say on writing books, William.
Well, that was quite a seminar, and certainly one I need to attend.
Well, here I go. People ask me all the time, how did you get started writing books? Did you set out to write books? And the answer to that is an unequivocal no. I research. As I'm researching, I like to write. And so I'm just normally at my typewriter, at my computer keyboard now. And as I read and as I think, I want to capture the thoughts that I have. And so I just start typing, and I just let it flow. And that's the way that it works for me. Other people have to sit down and in longhand write out their notes, and they have pages and pages and pages of notes. Well, I used to do that until someone introduced me to the computer. Oh, boy, that was the beginning of the end of Don Preston is what that was. But nonetheless, I honestly did not set out to write a book. The very first book that I ever published, I was teaching a Sunday night Bible class on 2 Peter 3, or on 2 Peter. And we came to chapter 3, and I warned the people that what I was going to present to them was not traditional view, but that I was going to do my best to present to them a good bit of really solid scholarly research to support what I was going to present. And so, man, I started digging into the commentaries. I started digging into the Greek grammars. I started just digging into history. And as I studied, I was just typing. And before you knew it, I had a manuscript. And my wife, of course, was familiar with what I was doing. One of the elders came to me one night and said, Are you making notes? And I said, well, I've got a manuscript that serves as my notes. And I said, it's how I research. He said, you have got to write a book on this. He said, "This is some of the most exciting stuff we have ever heard. It is fantastic." And I'm like, "Oh, uh, well, okay, I might think about that." So I began the editing process, and I self-published that book, and it sold out very quickly. I went through another printing of it, sold out pretty quickly, and that was the beginning of my book publishing career, William. That really just started from my own thoughts and thinking on 2 Peter 3, being urged by an elder to publish, and thinking, well, okay, I can do that. So there you go. That's the beginning of Don Preston's publishing career, which has not ended yet, I might add. Hopefully.
Well, I'm sure. I made the announcement early tonight that I was at least, even though we haven't done a new promo just yet, but I did, advise that, the 19 books has turned into 30 books. And so that is something that is, still ongoing and growing. So we definitely expect some more books. And I know you probably have 4 or 5 of them already in the works and just working on them all together. I knew.
I literally do. If you'll grant me a moment, I have my book on the death of Adam, the life of Christ, which is supposed to be going through its final editing this week, by the way. I have a book on the Sabbath entitled Celebrating the Eighth Day. I have a book on the parables that I began 7 or 8 years ago. I have a book on All Israel Shall Be Saved that I started 7 or 8 years ago. Those are just some of them. I have 2 books. I have one book on Matthew chapter 8, verse 11, or 10 and 11, on the resurrection, which was prompted by an article that you wrote how many years ago, William, in that little book that you did. And when I read your brief quotes in that, if you'll remember, I called you up and said, "Have you written a book on this? If you have it, you need to." And since you have it, I thought, well, then I'm a gonna. So I started this book on Matthew chapter 8, and I've also started a book on Matthew 24 and the resurrection. So I think that's about 6 different books that I currently have in process. I have one manuscript of a tract that was actually published in the early 80s, written against dispensationalism on the Messianic Temple. And every once in a while, I'll drag that manuscript back up on the screen, and I'll do some editing on it with a view to one day republishing that in a longer form. And as we've been doing on this program, certainly not tonight, obviously, because Preston got sidetracked here, but this issue of of the Messianic Temple is one that is just astoundingly important. And all the way back there in the early 80s, in 1983, I had my very first formal public debate. It was with a dispensationalist. And that debate came about partly because of some articles that I had run in the local newspaper, in which I had talked about the Messianic Temple and said, no temple is going to be rebuilt. We already have the Messianic Temple, and it's called the Church of the Living God, et cetera, et cetera. And so shortly after that debate, and as a result of the research for that debate, I began writing that book. It was a pamphlet back then, a little tract, and Star Publishing actually published it, if you remember Star Publishing, and they sold out of that almost immediately. Alvin Jennings told me that, and they never reprinted it for whatever reason. I don't know. Couldn't tell you why they did not, but he said that tract sold out almost immediately. And like I said, I've kept the manuscript. I think it's been a year since I've worked on it any at all, substantively at least, but it's there. So those are the current and semi-current projects that I have going. That Lord willing, the Lord grants me the time and the mental capability that I hope to be able to publish. I have to tell you right now, I'm super, super excited about this book, The Death of Adam, The Life of Christ. And I so very much appreciate your wonderful foreword that you wrote for it. And my next project, the one that I'm going to focus exclusively on, is the book on the Sabbath, entitled Celebrating the Eighth Day. And I can tell you right now, it's already over 300 pages long. I've been working on it for 3 years. I laid it aside to do the book on the death of Adam and the life of Christ. I laid it aside to do the little book that I published a year and a half ago on misplaced minds. I laid it aside to do the book that I did on marrying and giving in marriage and the new creation. I laid it aside to do the book on Elijah Has Already Come. So I've allowed some other books to take precedent, but I'm not doing that once I get my book, The Death of Adam and the Life of Christ, completely published. Once that's out of the way, and once I get Dan Derry's book published and, as it were, out of the way, then I will be focusing 100% on this book, Celebrating the Eighth Day. Now, I will tell you this. The working title was going to be Celebrating the Eighth Day, Shemini Atzeret. And I had different people tell me, no. Do not put Shemini Atzeret on the cover. That will scare people away. But I think a certain audience would be attracted to it. But I guess I've got to do some potential audience surveys and to find out, okay, would you buy a book with Shemini Atzeret on it, with Celebrating the Eighth Day, Shemini Atzeret? Or is it simply Celebrating the Eighth Day? I've got to do some research on that to find out which title would be most attractive to the people who are interested in the Sabbath issue, to the people who are interested in Israel's feast days, to the people who are interested in the correlation between Israel's feast days and eschatology. It was really interesting, William, just before coming on air, I was going over some of the YouTube comments on my video today, and one individual made the comment. This person comments on my videos quite often, and you can tell they're very well read. They've done a lot of research, and every single time the issue of the feast days come up, they have some really, really good comments to make. And this person stated, the reason that I became a full preterist was because of my research and study on Israel's feast days. And I found that absolutely amazing and thrilling. And I'm developing that entire concept. Now, this book is not the book on the feast days that I would really like to write. I don't know if I'm going to live long enough to do a book on the feast days as I envision one. But I'm going to have enough in this book on Celebrating the Eighth Day, on Israel's feast days, to show how integral they are to the study of eschatology, to show how all forms of futurism abuse, distort, and pervert the doctrine of the Sabbath and Israel's feast days. Most of them completely ignore the feast days. Even scholars such as N.T. Wright basically gloss right over the feast days of Israel. That is to say, they gloss over the last 3 feast days of Israel, and they give lip service and lip service only to the seventh-day issue. N.T. Wright, for instance, poses the question of why we don't find on the lips of Jesus or in Paul's discussion or in James or in Peter or in Revelation, why we don't find more discussion of the Sabbath. His answer to that is, well, because it had become irrelevant for them. And my answer to that is absolutely false. The last three feast days were pivotal, foundational, and paradigmatic, and that is inclusive also of the seventh-day Sabbath. Paul himself wrote in Colossians chapter 2, verse 16, "Let no man judge you therefore in respect of new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths, plural, which are, present active indicative, a shadow of the good things about to come." So when Paul wrote the new moons, which, by the way, the new moon festival was Rosh Hashanah. All of Israel's feast days, to sound redundant, were feast days. All of them were Sabbaths, including the seventh-day Sabbath. Pardon me, Leviticus chapter 23 and verse 2, which emphatically, specifically, and explicitly identified the seventh-day Sabbath as a feast unto the Lord. Which means, by the way, that when our Sabbatarian friends say, well, you know, all of the feast days, all of the ceremonial feast days were abolished, passed away, but not the seventh-day Sabbath. Well, sorry, the seventh-day Sabbath was stated to be listed as the very first of Israel's feast days. No distinction between that feast day and the rest of the feast days. And I have to tell you, I mentioned a moment ago, I'm really, really excited about this book on the death of Adam, the life of Christ. This material on celebrating the eighth day, I do not know of another book written by anyone that is approaching the subject of the Sabbath the way that I am. And I don't mean from a purely preterist perspective, okay? I am approaching this issue of the Sabbath from a perspective that was taken by the Jewish rabbis themselves, well stated, well documented, from a position that was iterated, although not fully developed, by some of the early church writers. For instance, Barnabas, who hinted, and that's all he did, who hinted at the significance of the eighth day. Oh, he said we are celebrating the eighth day now, but he never develops the significance of what that meant. He never discusses the significance of Shemini Atzeret. Never, so far as I've been able to determine. And to discuss the Sabbath day in the way that I am developing, that is right there on the pages of Scripture, I have not seen in any of the scholarly literature, in any of the literature on the Sabbath, none of them, I have not seen a single one of them develop the line of argumentation on the Sabbath that I will be developing in this book. And like I said, it's already over 300 pages long. I got to find a way to cut it down, but I've got a long way to go. So it may actually turn out to be a 2-volume set. Well, anyway, there went Preston again, off on another tangent. But, you know, I do have people all the time, William, asking me what kind of projects, what book projects am I working on right now? I can tell you this, there's a lot of interest both in this book, The Death of Adam, the Life of Christ. There is even more interest in this book on the Sabbath. When I announced a couple of years ago that I was going to be writing a book on the Sabbath, there has been a relatively steady stream of inquiries from people how you coming on your book on the Sabbath? I really honestly believe it will be a distinctive, unique, and hopefully influential book on the Sabbath day, demonstrating beyond a shadow of a doubt the Lord came in AD 70, bringing to us the eternal Sabbath. And with that, folks, I will say we appreciate you being with us here on Two Guys and a Bible on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. William, I'm sorry my equipment failed me. Hopefully I can get some new mics and headphones, and that won't happen next week. But in the meantime, I will say good night and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys and a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Dunn Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.